My ex-husband demanded alimony because he sacrificed his career for our marriage and deserved compensation. So I brought receipts to court that proved what he was really doing while I worked 60-hour weeks. The judge's eyebrows rose as I opened my folder. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence of Mr. Donovan's activities during our 5-year marriage. Brett sat there in his designer suit, bought with my bonus, looking like the victim he'd rehearsed being. His lawyer had painted him as the devoted house husband who gave up his promising consulting career to support my rise at the tech firm. While I was debugging code until 3 a.m., Brett was indeed very busy, I said, pulling out the first document. Credit card statements. Thousands at high-end golf courses. Monthly memberships at 3 different country clubs. Wine tastings every Tuesday at $300 per session. Building connections for future employment. Brett's lawyer interjected. I smiled. Is that what we're calling it? Next came the employment records. Brett had been offered 4 positions during our marriage, senior roles with 6-figure salaries. He'd accepted none of them. I needed flexibility to support my wife's demanding schedule, Brett said, his voice cracking perfectly. The judge studied the rejection emails Brett had sent. Each one cited personal pursuits and lifestyle incompatibility as reasons for declining. Then I produced the coup de grace, screenshots from his fitness app. Mr. Donovan logged 8-hour workout sessions 5 days a week. That's a full-time job of self-care. His Instagram showed the truth. Shirtless gym selfies at 10 a.m., lunch with his trainer Veronica at noon. Afternoon, meditation retreats that were actually gaming marathons. The judge flipped through hundreds of posts. Brett's feed was a monument to leisure funded by my labor. There's more, I said quietly. Bank records showed Brett had been transferring money to an account I'd never known about. $500 here, $1,000 there. Over 5 years, he'd accumulated $73,000 while telling me we needed to budget carefully. That was for emergencies, Brett stammered. Emergencies like your upcoming trip to Bali with Veronica? His face drained of color. I had screenshots of their messages, planning their new life together once he secured his deserved compensation from our divorce. The judge's expression hardened as he reviewed everything. Mr. Donovan, you're requesting $4,000 monthly alimony for the next 7 years, claiming career sacrifice? Brett nodded, trying to recover his victim persona. Mrs. Donovan, do you have anything else to add? I pulled out my final document. Just this, Your Honor. It was a printed email from Brett to Veronica, sent 3 days before he filed for divorce. The stupid cow has no idea. I'll milk her for everything, then we can finally start our real life. 7 years of payments will set us up perfectly. The courtroom went silent. Brett's lawyer frantically whispered to him while shuffling papers. The judge cleared his throat. I've seen enough. Mr. Donovan, your request for alimony is denied. Furthermore, wait, Brett interrupted, his mask finally slipping. You don't understand what I know about her company, what I could tell them. The judge paused. Are you threatening your ex-wife with blackmail in my courtroom? Brett's lawyer grabbed his arm, but Brett shook him off, his face red with rage. She thinks she's so smart with her receipts. But I know about Project Prometheus, the federal contracts, the security breach she covered up last year. My blood ran cold. There had been no security breach. But Project Prometheus, that was classified. How did Brett even know that name? The judge leaned forward. Mr. Donovan, I'm ordering you to remain after. Mrs. Donovan, you're free to go, but I may need to speak with you again. As I gathered my documents, Brett's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his rage transformed into something else. Fear. They know I'm here, he whispered. Who knows? His lawyer demanded. Brett's hands shook as he showed the text to his lawyer, whose face went pale. I couldn't see the message, but I heard Brett's next words clearly. We need federal protection, now. The bailiff stepped forward as 2 men in dark suits entered the courtroom. They weren't local law enforcement. These men had the kind of presence that made everyone stop talking. Mrs. Donovan, one of them said, approaching me with a badge. Agent Richardson, FBI, we need to speak with you immediately. My mind raced. Project Prometheus was a defense contract my company had been awarded 6 months ago, highly classified cybersecurity work for military installations. I'd been the lead developer, working with a team of 12 engineers under strict security protocols. What about? I asked, though my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Your husband's allegations, Richardson said, and his recent communications with foreign nationals. Brett's face went white. I never... Mr. Donovan, the second agent interrupted. You've been under surveillance for 3 weeks. Every call, every email, every meeting. The judge stood. I'm declaring a recess. Clear the courtroom except for necessary parties. As people filed out, Richardson turned to me. Mrs. Donovan, when did you first notice your husband showing unusual interest in your work? I thought back through the marriage. Brett had always been dismissive of my job, calling it nerd stuff and complaining about my long hours. But recently, about 4 months ago, I said slowly, he started asking questions, what projects I was working on, who I was meeting with. I thought he was finally showing interest. Did you ever discuss Project Prometheus at home? Never. I signed an NDA. I don't even keep work files on my personal devices. Agent Richardson exchanged glances with his partner. Mr. Donovan, we'd like you to explain these. He pulled out a tablet, showing screenshots of encrypted messages. Brett's name was listed as the sender. The messages contained detailed information about Project Prometheus, security protocols, team member names, meeting schedules. I don't know anything about those, Brett said, but his voice cracked. The metadata says otherwise. Richardson replied. These were sent from your personal laptop, the same laptop we found in your apartment with a sophisticated keylogger installed. My stomach dropped. Brett had access to my home office. I'd trusted him completely. How long has he been monitoring my computer? I asked, based on the software installation date. Approximately 8 months. 8 months. Almost our entire marriage had been a lie. Who was he sending information to? I demanded. Richardson hesitated. We're still investigating the full scope, but we've identified contacts in 3 different countries. This isn't just corporate espionage. It's a national security issue. Brett finally spoke, his voice small. They said they just wanted to know about defense contracts. They paid me $50,000 upfront and promised more. Who is they? The judge asked. I don't know their real names. Everything was done through encrypted channels. They found me online, said they represented foreign investors interested in American tech companies. The pieces clicked into place. The secret bank account. The mysterious money transfers. Brett hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been selling classified information. Your Honor, I said, turning to the judge, I need to call my security officer immediately. If our project has been compromised, we need to implement containment protocols. Agent Richardson, the judge said, I'm placing Mr. Donovan in federal custody pending investigation. Mrs. Donovan, you're free to make your call, but please remain available. As they led Brett away in handcuffs, he looked back at me with desperate eyes. Claire, you have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. They said it was just market research. I stared at him. This man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years. You sold out your country for golf memberships and gym sessions. Please. No, I cut him off. You made your choice when you installed that keylogger. You made your choice when you took their money. You made your choice when you tried to blackmail me in court. The courtroom emptied except for Agent Richardson and me. Mrs. Donovan, we're going to need you to come to our field office for a full debriefing. Your company's security team is already being notified. I nodded, gathering my divorce papers, which suddenly seemed incredibly trivial. Will I be able to continue working on the project? That depends on what we find, but I have to warn you, this investigation could take months. Your entire team will need to be vetted again. As we walked to his car, my phone rang. It was my boss, Helena. Claire, what the hell is going on? FBI agents just showed up at the office asking about Project Prometheus. It's Brett, I said, the words tasting bitter. He's been selling information. Silence on the other end. How much did he access? Helena finally asked. I don't know yet, but they had detailed information about security protocols and team members. Jesus Christ. Claire, you need to know, if this project is compromised, it's not just about the contract. Lives are at stake. This technology protects military personnel overseas. The weight of Brett's betrayal hit me fully. He hadn't just violated my trust or stolen money, he'd potentially endangered soldiers. At the FBI field office, I spent 6 hours in a sterile conference room, answering questions and reviewing every interaction I'd had with Brett over the past year. They showed me more evidence, photos of him meeting with unknown individuals, bank records showing payments from shell companies, even recordings of phone calls. The good news, Agent Richardson said during a break, is that the information he provided was largely outdated. Your company's security protocols changed 3 weeks ago. Why didn't you arrest him earlier? We wanted to trace the full network. Brett was small time, a useful idiot. We've identified at least 12 other similar operations targeting defense contractors. That evening, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the walls Brett had painted when we first moved in together. Every memory felt contaminated. Had he ever loved me? Or was I always just a mark? My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Judge finalized the divorce today. No alimony, obviously. You're officially free. Free. But free to what? My marriage was a lie. My security clearance was under review, and I might lose the job I'd worked 10 years to achieve. The next morning, Helena called me into her office. Claire, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that Project Prometheus is being restructured. New team, new protocols, new location. My heart sank. And the good news? They want you to lead the new team. The FBI confirmed that you had no knowledge of Brett's activities. In fact, your security protocols are being used as a model for other projects. I can keep working? Not just working. You're being promoted to Senior Director of Cybersecurity, effective immediately. I sat down heavily. Helena, I let a foreign agent into my home for 5 years. How can you trust me with more responsibility? Because you didn't let them in. Brett did. And because your response to this crisis shows exactly the kind of integrity we need. You could have tried to cover it up or minimize the damage. Instead, you immediately prioritized national security over your personal situation. 3 weeks later, Brett was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The judge was particularly harsh, noting that Brett had not only committed espionage but had attempted to weaponize divorce proceedings to continue his criminal activity. Veronica, it turned out, had been an unwitting accomplice. Brett had told her he was a successful consultant with international clients. She'd broken up with him the moment the FBI explained his real situation. I testified at his sentencing hearing, not out of revenge, but because the prosecutor said my testimony was crucial for the other cases they were building. Your Honor, I said, looking directly at Brett, the defendant didn't just betray his country. He betrayed the fundamental trust that makes society function. He turned our marriage into a cover for espionage and tried to use our divorce as leverage for more criminal activity. Brett's mother sat in the gallery, crying quietly. She'd raised him alone after his father died in Vietnam. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. After the sentencing, Agent Richardson approached me outside the courthouse. "Mrs. Donovan, I wanted you to know, your case broke open an entire network. We've arrested 23 people across 7 states. The information Brett provided led us to other compromised contracts and potentially saved lives. How many military operations were affected? That's classified, but I can tell you that the countermeasures we implemented because of your case prevented several planned attacks on overseas bases." I drove home slowly, processing everything that had happened. In the span of a month, I'd gone from a woman fighting for dignity in divorce court to someone whose personal nightmare had helped protect American soldiers. My new apartment was smaller than the one I'd shared with Brett, but it felt like mine. I'd bought new furniture, new dishes, new everything. The only thing I'd kept from our marriage was a small painting my grandmother had given me, a reminder that some things are genuinely valuable. 6 months later, I was working late in my new office when my assistant knocked. "Claire, there's someone here to see you. She says it's about Brett." I looked up to see a woman in her 30s, nervous, but determined. "I'm Kelly Zhao," she said. "I was married to Brett before you." My blood went cold. Brett had never mentioned a previous marriage. "He did the same thing to you, didn't he?" she continued. I gestured for her to sit down. "What do you mean?" "The financial manipulation, the secret accounts, making you feel crazy when you questioned his behavior. But with me, it was pharmaceutical research. I worked for a biotech company developing cancer treatments." Kelly pulled out a folder, her own collection of receipts and documents. "He married me in 2015, divorced me in 2018. The whole time he was copying my research and selling it to competitors. I thought I was crazy when proprietary information kept leaking from projects I was working on." "Did you report it?" "I tried, but he was careful. Made it look like I was the security risk. I lost my job and my reputation. Took me 4 years to rebuild my career." I stared at the documents. Brett's pattern was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. "Kelly, the FBI needs to see this. Brett's case isn't closed. They're still tracking the network he was involved with. That's why I'm here." I saw the news coverage of his sentencing. I realized I wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 hours, Kelly told me about 2 other women Brett had targeted, both in defense-related fields, both divorced after short marriages, both left with damaged careers and trust issues. "He has a type," Kelly said. "Successful women in sensitive positions. Isolated, usually workaholics who don't have strong social networks to question his behavior. So we were all just targets. From the beginning, the FBI agent I spoke with said his handlers probably identified us years before he even made contact. I called Agent Richardson immediately. Within 3 days, the investigation had expanded again. Brett's previous marriages weren't just personal failures. They were part of a long-term espionage operation. The most disturbing revelation came when they analyzed Brett's dating app activity. He'd been using multiple profiles on professional networking sites, specifically targeting women in defense and technology sectors. This wasn't opportunistic, Richardson explained during a briefing. This was systematic. He was recruited and trained to identify and marry specific targets. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on what we've uncovered, at least 8 years. You and Kelly are just the ones we know about." Kelly and I started meeting regularly, not just to support each other, but to help the FBI understand Brett's methods. We compared notes, timelines, red flags we'd missed. "The crazy thing is," Kelly said during one of our coffee meetings, "I blamed myself for years, thought I'd been too trusting, too focused on work, too naive about relationships. Same. I kept thinking if I'd been more attentive, more present, maybe he wouldn't have cheated. But he wasn't cheating for emotional reasons. He was doing his job." That realization was both liberating and horrifying. Our marriages hadn't failed because of anything we'd done wrong. They'd failed because they'd never been real to begin with. A year after Brett's sentencing, I received a call from the Department of Defense. They wanted me to speak at a conference about protecting classified information in personal relationships. "Mrs. Donovan, your case has become a model for training security personnel. We'd like you to share your experience with other cleared professionals." Standing at that podium, looking out at an audience of engineers, analysts, and military officers, I realized something important. Brett hadn't just stolen information, he'd stolen my story. For years, I'd defined myself by his betrayal, by what he'd done to me. But that wasn't my story anymore. The most insidious part of espionage targeting, I told the audience, isn't the theft of information, it's the theft of trust. When someone infiltrates your personal life, they don't just steal your secrets, they steal your ability to believe in your own judgment. I talked about the red flags I'd missed, the manipulation tactics Brett had used, the way he'd slowly isolated me from friends and family while positioning himself as my only source of emotional support. "But here's what I want you to remember," I concluded. "The people who do this are professionals. They're trained to exploit normal human desires for connection and intimacy. If you fall victim to these tactics, it doesn't mean you're weak or naive. It means you're human." After my speech, a young woman approached me. "Ms. Donovan, I think someone might be targeting me the same way. Can we talk?" Her name was Fatima, and she worked for an aerospace contractor. She'd been dating a man for 6 months who seemed too good to be true. Charming, successful, intensely interested in her work. "He asks a lot of questions about our projects," she said. "Claims he's just fascinated by engineering, but some of his questions are really specific." We spent an hour going through her relationship, comparing it to the patterns Kelly and I had identified. The similarities were striking. "What should I do?" Fatima asked. "First, document everything. Every conversation, every question, every time he's had access to your devices. Then contact the FBI. And Fatima? Yes? Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. 6 months later, Fatima's boyfriend was arrested as part of yet another espionage ring. Her early reporting had prevented a major security breach at her company. I now work as a consultant helping defense contractors develop security protocols that account for human factors, the emotional and psychological vulnerabilities that traditional security training doesn't address. Kelly became my business partner. Together, we've trained thousands of cleared professionals to recognize manipulation tactics and report suspicious behavior. Brett will be eligible for parole in 12 years. Sometimes I wonder if he'll try to contact me when he gets out. Part of me hopes he does, because I have things to say to him now that I didn't have the words for during our divorce. I want to tell him that he didn't break me, that his betrayal led me to work that's more meaningful than anything I did while we were married, that the skills I developed surviving his manipulation made me better at protecting others. But mostly, I want to tell him that I'm grateful, not for what he did, but for what I discovered about myself in the aftermath. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can rebuild trust without becoming paranoid, that I can help others without sacrificing my own boundaries. Brett thought he was using me to advance his career in espionage. Instead, he helped me discover my real calling in protecting national security. Last month, I received a letter from a soldier stationed overseas. Her unit had been protected by security measures developed using protocols from my case. She wanted to thank me for helping keep her team safe. I keep that letter on my desk, next to a photo from Kelly's wedding last year. She married a teacher, someone completely unconnected to defense work, someone who loves her for who she is rather than what she knows. I'm dating someone too, a firefighter named Damon who's never shown the slightest interest in my security clearance or my work projects. He's curious about my life, but in the way that people who care about each other are curious, wanting to understand, not extract. The first time he asked about my work, I felt that familiar spike of fear. But then he added, "I hope it's not too stressful. You deserve a job that makes you happy." That's when I knew he was different. Brett trained me to see relationships as potential security risks, but real love isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you can build together. I'm building something real now, a career that matters, relationships based on trust, a life that's mine. Brett stole 5 years of my life and classified information worth millions of dollars. But he also led me to discover who I really am when everything is stripped away. I'm someone who fights back, someone who protects others, someone who turns betrayal into purpose. And that's worth more than any alimony payment ever could have been. The divorce papers are filed away now, gathering dust in a filing cabinet. But the security protocols Kelly and I developed are being used across the defense industry. The training programs we created have prevented dozens of potential breaches. Brett's betrayal created ripples that extended far beyond our marriage, but so did my response to it. Every time a cleared professional recognizes manipulation tactics because of our training, Brett's plan fails a little more. Every time someone reports suspicious behavior because they understand the warning signs, the network he was part of gets weaker. He thought he was recruiting me into his scheme. Instead, he recruited me into the fight against people like him. And unlike his marriage proposal, that's a commitment I'll keep for the rest of my life. The last time I saw Brett was at his sentencing hearing, when the judge asked if I had anything to say before determining his punishment. I stood up in that courtroom, looked at the man who had shared my bed while stealing state secrets, and said, "Your Honor, I hope Mr. Donovan uses his time in prison to understand the difference between a marriage and a mission, because the woman he thought he was manipulating doesn't exist anymore. She was replaced by someone who fights back. That woman, the one who fights back, is who I am now, and she's just getting started."